Here we go. It's incentivizer speech. There we go.
Hello, my name is Cheyenne COF, and I'm going to be talking about the controversy over zoos. So I'm sure we all know what a zoo is, but I wanted to provide you guys with the generalized definition that was given by Google, which I'm sure is like website. It states that a zoo is an establishment which maintains a collection of wild animals, typically in a park or gardens, for study, conservation, or display to the public. And if I can ask you guys to keep that definition in the back of your minds while I give my speech. So the first point I would like to address is zoos cause psychological distress in the animals, and they could do this simply just by not providing the correct living conditions that they would get in their natural habitats. An article from University Wire comments that most zoos do not house orca whales, but places like SeaWorld keep the whales in very small enclosures, which will eventually lead to incredibly short and miserable lifespans. So animals can get depressed and feel anxiety from being in those enclosures for long amounts of time, which is just sounds like a normal reaction to what we would get. Also, animals can also display forms of self-harm, harm to its co-inhabitants, or harms to the caregivers themselves. I have another quote from University Wire that says that when certain animals, such as elephants, feel caged away, they become aggressive, which can be dangerous in any zoo setting, especially towards employees who are taking care of the elephants. And I'm going to assume that we've heard somewhat about the incident in SeaWorld that happened a few years ago, but to briefly explain, there was a trainer in the tank with the orca whale, and the whale took her to the bottom twice, and when she escaped, the orca then grabbed her again and took her at the bottom, and unfortunately she passed away that way. And a second point I would like to make is that some zoos fail to focus on the conservation and educational aspect that they should be. I don't want to come off as saying one species is more important than the other. However, there are thousands of other species that are endangered, but the ones you see the most are polar bears, elephants, lions, tigers, rhinos, giraffes, which are the species that are more appealing to society's view. Also, people only want to invest and donate to animals that they think are more cute or can end up being more profitable for them to invest in. Also, with that being said, animals are also sometimes relocated and they can even be killed once they have outlived that possibility. Another quote from University Wire says that the Business Journal wrote an article about the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle a few years ago, describing how the zoo should have retired 2 of its elephants to an enclosure, but instead relocated them to a different zoo, supposedly because of finances. So these animals can just be transported, and they could be sick, or they could be too old, and they're still being transported, which can also add stress to the animal when, in a sense, they're being overworked. Lastly, zoos fail to look for what is best for the species, and what I mean by this is sometimes they could lose sight of what's important or what the main purpose originally what the zoo was meant for. And a quote from Subpoena nicely states that good zoos do effective conservation work and continually strive to improve exhibits, relevance to conservation, and inspiring public engagement for wildlife. And the downside of some species being in breeding programs in captivity is that us as humans, we cannot control their breeding behaviors or their cycles. And I'm not sure if you guys know, but some animals will not, or the females will not go into their estrus cycle if they're under the wrong climate or under high levels of stress. Either they will not be able to properly reproduce. that can also be an issue. And when we do have animals that are able to breed in captivity, breeders are only given a certain amount of animals that they can breed with, so they don't have that much of a genetic variability, which can lead to less and less genetic variation, which will then lead to more health risk, and then furthermore lead to other diseases that they can get. Originally, I believe that the intentions for zoos were pure and very good towards the animals, but I believe as time went on, people lost sight of what was more important and instead went for the finances and just to make a profit off of these animals and to show us the public.
What was the time on that?
5:45.
Okay.
It's 5:50.
Okay.
It's a 10-second.
All right, at the beginning of the speech, I know what the topic is. I don't know what the proposition is. There's no real statement of what the proposition is. There's no preview of what the supporting points are going to be. I know that it's going to be about zoos, and you kind of list what the goal of the zoos are, and that we're supposed to keep that in mind. You launch right into what the substructure is going to be in the body of the speech, and you mentioned psychological harm, that they fail to concentrate on the conservation issues, and that they're not always looking out for the best interests of the animals. So those are the secondary points. I guess I would group all those things together and make a claim that says zoos are, harmful to the animal populations that they serve, or something like that. I'm sure that you have a proposition. It just was not very clear at the beginning, and at the end, by the way, I didn't think it was very clear either. I just got a recap of what the main points were without telling me how they all fit together and support a main proposition. So I think that there's an organizational issue to begin with there at the start of the speech, but the body of the speech is actually structured clearly. You have evidence on the individual points. I don't know what University Wire is. It seems like it's reporting some basic data, a couple of incidents and examples that it cites, and then there is an expert that gets quoted on one of those sites as well. It sounds a little anecdotal in nature, which is not a bad thing to start with, but usually you want to follow that up with some statistics. So we've got this information about the orcas at SeaWorld and how they might be depressed, but we don't have any data that talks about how much their lives have been shortened compared to the wild. That would be information that I think would help there. The elephant population, you mentioned that there are some potential problems there, and then we get back to the SeaWorld example. So I guess we don't have any examples of elephants getting aggressive, but we do have an example of an orca getting aggressive with one of its trainers. And I don't know how long ago that incident was. I don't know how frequently it occurs. It's certainly a dramatic example that goes on there, but my guess would be that there are probably situations in the wild where similar kinds of things have happened, where people have been killed by animals. I don't know that that means that it's any more likely to occur in a zoo or an aquarium than it is someplace else. The example that you have about the Seattle Zoo is a little ambiguous. It just says instead of going off to a reserve where they were supposed to go, they ended up being moved to some other zoo. And what was the harmful consequence to them? That was not very clear. The idea that they're failing to concentrate on conservation issues, you just kind of give general description about animals that the public likes and says, oh, that's what they spend all their money on, but I didn't hear any data on that. I didn't hear any information about spending or priorities there. That seems to be a large assumption. I do know that there is sometimes that tendency. I had a great speech a few years ago that's basically argued we should stop wasting our money on trying to save the panda and let it die. let it, become extinct. Because pandas just, they don't want to breed, they don't want to do anything to preserve themselves, and we spend all the money on that, and we're not spending it on these other things. So I know that there's some validity to your argument, but I don't know it because of what you said. I know it because of something else that I heard in another speech 5 years ago. So, which I remember because they said, hell with the damn panda, which made it easy to remember that. You do cite your sources for the most part. I do think, like I said, a couple of times you cited, I think, Sophie Wilcox or Nicole or something like that. I don't know who she is and why I should be listening to her. That's one of those places where you need to qualify the sources that you're presenting. Nobody's listening because they're all ready to get out of here. I feel like I should just keep talking to make you stay. All right, you guys have a good afternoon.